This year's budget, I think, is going to continue its focus towards the larger picture of the Viksit Bharat objectives by 2047 to become a $30 trillion economy. We need an average growth of over 9% if we have to really become Viksit Bharat by 2047. Of course, the government has to give the push to the core sectors as well. Infrastructure, education, energy, and quite a few other sectors like urban development, and there are many other areas that the government has been focusing on. I think that objective will continue. Even the focus on the agriculture, rural development will also continue. And I think from that perspective, the opportunity for venture capital will become more and more attractive in areas related to these, where there'll be further investment opportunities which will come up. But as a venture capital fund, I expect a few basic things to happen. For example, we're still capital-starved country. We are still just about 15% of the total invested capital in the venture capital private equity ecosystem, which is domestic. 85% capital still dollar capital, so there's a huge dependence on dollar capital. I think there is a requirement for a further push to encourage creation of more pools of domestic capital. On that front, we as Ivy Cap Ventures have also made our contribution, and we will continue to push efforts towards building the endowment ecosystem in the country. I believe that endowments will create a substantial pool of domestic capital over a period of time. In addition, pension funds pool of capital needs to be opened up quite substantially, and there needs to be some push that should be given. But in the larger scheme of things, there is a requirement for the additional fund of funds allocation for the AIF industry through SIDBI, through SRI, and through other channels. And I think the various other pockets of capital is being created, and I think government has been making those efforts, and maybe those efforts need to continue. Focus on women entrepreneurs, I think, is going to be key. India is actually performing much better as compared to many other countries in terms of the number of women entrepreneurs now coming up. Given the fact that even in IITs now we have 20% women enrollment, we are seeing more and more women entrepreneurs coming to us, which is actually very positive. And I think if we give more incentives to women entrepreneurs, it will become very positive for the overall economy. I'm also expecting and hoping for some allocation for deep tech, space tech, and adjacent areas. I think these are the areas where India needs to really focus on, and I think it's very heartening to see the number of startups which are coming up in these areas. So quite exciting to see the emergence of those startups, but at the same time, if we give more and more incentives to startups in those areas, I believe that we will see a much larger growth in those startups as well. The other important thing which needs to be done is protection of IP and creation of more IP in India. I think India has a huge potential. We've seen Indian talent going out and creating their IP, but that IP then gets contributed to those countries where they actually build those IP. I think Indian talent should be creating IP in our own country, and there's an opportunity to therefore provide more support to IITs, IIMs, BITS, ISB, Indian Institute of Science, and many other such institutions to promote IP creation in India. And I think there are other areas as well which will actually lead to achieving the overall objectives of Viksit Bharat, which is giving lot more support to skill development, employment generation, for people at the bottom of the pyramid. I think given the four pillars of Viksit Bharat, which we're talking about youth, poor, women and Kisan, I think if you have to continue to focus on those four pillars for our growth towards achieving our targets, I think incentives have to be created across all these four pillars. Agriculture is another area which will require a lot more support. India will have to continue to boost a lot more production. Companies like Celsius, which is one of our portfolio companies, has the potential to really bring down wastages in the entire supply chain. And I think that's one of the areas, if there is a lot more infrastructure support, creating a lot more cold chain and also providing logistic support, I think that will be very, very helpful. And of course, bringing more investments into India, especially leveraging our GIFT City structures. We are yet to see a substantial inflow of capital through the GIFT City structures, and I think there is a potential to really leverage that and provide a lot more incentives for people to really come through that structure. People are still following a wait and watch policy when it comes to GIFT City. So I think there's an opportunity there. And last but not the least, I think some of the basic areas like healthcare, education are the areas that need substantial focus. I personally believe that healthcare, while it has got a boost through the Ayushman Bharat model, I think we also need to improve our infrastructure for healthcare. I think we still are lagging in terms of the number of hospital beds, the doctors, the talent emerging out of our medical colleges. We need to put a lot more focus on bringing out a lot more talent in the healthcare field. And I think the same goes for education as well. There are lots of opportunities there, and I think if government focuses on increasing the budgets in these two areas, and I think that will help in the overall boosting the economy. So that's the bigger picture, and I think from the venture capital perspective, I'm quite hopeful that there will be some incentives related to some specific asks that we have been putting in front of the government, including how the taxation works with respect to, for example, how the expenses in a VC fund are taxed. For example, the management fees, the GST on the management fees, and things like how you get the tax benefit on the invested capital versus the raised capital. There is that delta which actually needs to be captured from the overall perspective, from the investor's perspective. That will give a lot more incentives to LPs, limited partners, who are investing in VC funds. So I would strongly encourage looking into those aspects and hoping that there will be some focus on that. And of course, there are certain sectors that will definitely get a lot more attention, and even as venture capital funds, we do look at these sectors as high growth sectors. For example, I already mentioned about deep tech, space tech, artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, and most of these technologies are actually now showing their actual value. And in some of our companies as well, we are seeing the actual value coming out of the real application of the technologies. So I think if we continue to give more boost and also protecting IP within our country, I think that will create a very, very solid growth towards our Viksit Bharat objectives of 2047. So with that, thank you so much. Those are my initial thoughts and comments with respect to the expectation from the budget.